Alrighty, let's get started. So, just gonna introduce our main attraction of it. So in the spotlight here that you can all see, this is Healy, who I'm sure you're all very, very familiar with. Just a quick little blurb. I've been listening to Healy for a long time. When we were looking for someone to bring on this year for the class, we were thinking about a lot of people, and we often talk about production in the sense of technical sense. But I think that, you know, when we create art, there's a lot of facets that sometimes might go a little overlooked, especially when we talk about it in the realm of production. I think songwriting is a form of production in itself. And here to talk to us today about that facet and about the duality of it. If you guys all want to give me a warm welcome in joining me in giving him a warm welcome, this is Healy, here to talk about the duality of songwriting. So, hello, how you doing today?
What's up? I'm good. It's a beautifully brisk Sunday afternoon in Brooklyn, and I've got my big puffer on still. It's very cold. Regretting to turn the heat on, so trying to bundle up, but good nonetheless. Yeah, I guess first off, I want to thank Adam and everyone at QWave for this opportunity to kind of get to share a little bit about my approach, while also learning a little bit about myself in the process. This life is like, I mean, like doing things like this is still very foreign to me. Like I grew up knowing that I wanted to positively affect a large amount of people, and I didn't know how it was going to happen, but for that to manifest in this like fun, creative reality is just, it's crazy. And I'm constantly surprised with where music just continues to bring me and take me. And I've been feeling called to transparency over, I don't know, the most recent months, or just like in this most recent season of life. And so I felt like this was kind of the universe like winking at me while I was doing this. But mostly, like as Adam said, what I'm going to be getting into today and talking about is the duality with which I approach songwriting. And I mean, just like anything in life, songs kind of have this like inherent balance of opposing forces. Today we'll call them like concrete and abstract, is what we'll refer to them as. But when you do wield these forces well, you're almost able to kind of like alchemize like even a stanza or like an emotion into like a new piece of art that's pure and true and honest and unique to your life and your experience, which is I don't know, it's just really crazy to me. Like it's like literally magic. So I don't know, it's just I'm really grateful for this opportunity to get to talk about this. I'm gonna create a couple opportunities or just like some moments throughout for questions and comments. But if I've got the chat pulled up and I'm gonna make it as big as I can here. I've got it pulled up. So if there's ever anything like a burning question or thought that just comes to you, please don't shy away from asking or addressing them. Because I'd like to keep this as open of a dialogue and conversation as possible. But again, I thank you everybody for being here, and dedicating a little bit of your time, your Sunday, to hear me talk about this. Before we get into it, I feel like I should probably set the stage and give some background on my journey into music as a whole. So I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, about like 10 minutes from the Mississippi River. And so I really did kind of grow up treading this like rich cultural and musical channel, and the tides definitely still inform a lot of my like taste and creative decision making to this day. My dad's dad was itinerant growing up, and so he was working in a bunch of different places, and so my dad lived in several different cities across like the South and the Northeast, and my mom grew up in Ripley, Tennessee, which is like the sticks of Tennessee. It's close to Memphis still, but you know, so she had these like deep Americana roots, and her mom put her on to like a lot of Memphis soul and some of the music that was coming out of Stax in the 60s and 70s and like Motown stuff. And my dad was a lot more of like a mixed bag of like new wave and 80s pop, like Creedence Clearwater Revival, like REM, Morrissey, Steely Dan, The Police, stuff like that. And so they kind of combined to form a really expansive musical palette. And I owe a lot, if not everything, to them surrounding me with such a wide array of music. But I also owe a lot to Memphis, and just like the overall ethos and energy there, and to things like my mom being in the choir in church too. You know, like hymns were like echoing and bouncing off the walls every week, every weekend. And I think she has some like undiagnosed absolute pitch or like relative pitch stuff, because like she hasn't studied music like a day in her life, and she just effortlessly harmonizes every single song and like hums along with every single song, and just can like guess and assume where it's going to go. And so growing up around that, I just owe a lot to this like dynamic and very musical upbringing. Like my sister and I have matching Crosby, Stills and Nash tattoos, and I want That's the Way of the World by Earth, Wind and Fire to play on loop at my funeral. Like Lucinda Williams proved to me that there's a market for honest and discreet storytelling. Crosby, Stills and Nash helped me translate like feelings and harmonies or feelings to harmonies and vice versa. And then, you know, you pick up on your own stuff too. And so artists like Frank Ocean taught me that emotion is such a powerful and delicate tool. And then like the Southern mixtape scene with like Project Pat and Juicy J and 3 6 Mafia, all of their skits within their mixtapes and projects just like kind of made me consider the idea of creating moments within projects that add another dimension to the work. And as for like a gradient now from listener to storyteller, the guitar and just the creative process as a whole were both lifelines for me, and what I would probably consider just one of my, like, I guess just within the eye of one of my life's most intense storms. My parents were divorcing, and I was turning 18, and I was like repping this new autonomy and just like really starting to peel back the layers and get to know myself. And fortunately, I was surrounded by a brilliant network of like super imaginative people who all played in bands. They were multi-instrumentalists, and they like acted in the school plays, yada yada. And they were also like, really emotionally in touch. And so I was granted this, like, I don't know, like really safe space to communicate very intentionally and intimately, and I don't know, be rewarded for this like pure individualism. And so I looked to them, and like I really stumbled into that friend group. And I wouldn't be who I am without them today, and because they definitely supported the journey and supported, like, I don't know, stepping into these shoes of being like a storyteller and songwriter. And so I looked to them for support, and songwriting eventually just became a tool and an outlet for me to release all this like confusion and all these emotions into and transpose them. And so I'll always have a really deep connection to and reverence for the creative process, and more specifically, the songwriting process. And mostly because I wouldn't be who I am today without music. And I'm really beginning to like myself a lot more these days, which is great. And that just kind of helps keep the gratitude feedback loop spinning. And so in short, I really just like, music played a large role in my life from a very early age. And to me, songs are the bookmarks of life. And so I have like a song for, every like meaningful memory that I can think of. And so it's played a large role in forming who I am. And I've just had a lot of time to just internalize that and reflect on it, and kind of join forces with like the universe and songs as a whole, and just like live them out and just give them a space and appreciate them. So that's kind of like how, I don't know, my vestibule into songwriting. But I actually see a quick question here, and it's a great time, because I was actually going to open things up to any questions about like influences or anything that I talked about, or anything that's coming to you before we get into the concrete and the abstract specifically. So I see that Keanu asked, "Hey man, it's Keanu. What did you struggle with most in songwriting when you were 18? Like a lesson that you had to learn years later?" It's a great question. I think something that I struggled with was, and I still struggle with to this day, and I was actually just talking about it with Adam, is like sometimes not knowing what needs to be said. And sometimes there isn't anything that needs to be said, and you can't force that. And I think for a long time, I tried to force it just for the sake of, right when you get started, you're kind of cutting your teeth and finding your voice. And I think that's the time to just like go in and just like make as much as you can. But you have to be able to like thread the line between chasing and forcing something. And so something that I have, I struggled with early on was, and just recently kind of come over the hump with, is forcing things and learning to let go and not hinge your life on whether or not you write a good song, or like whether or not you like make something that, like, I don't know, or whatever your operational definition of success is, like not achieving that or something. So I think that's one lesson that I struggled with, was being discontent with like output, or just like the quality of my work, because I was forcing it. And I've found recently that just letting go and just approaching life, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but with like a sense of like reversed effort, like a law of reversed effort, just like it really helps. And so it's something that I've come to grips with over the recently. How did your songwriting and sound develop and change during your college years? That's a great question too. I think, and I'll also get into this a little bit, but it became, I think I transitioned from like a concrete, very like autobiographical style to, this like stepping into a new realm of like fiction almost, and like saturating my life and my memories. And the more I began to like read and like take on like my own reading projects, not stuff that like school made me like read and stuff, it just like developed my passion for it, and also widened my awareness, and just like gave me different influences. So I started writing music just on the guitar, and eventually like couldn't really find the melodies just right there. And that's when I transitioned to more like Ableton production, just like learning to play the piano a bit, or just like training my pitch a little bit more, to where I could like play things by ear if I needed to. And so it transitioned from this like one-dimensional singer-songwriter style to almost like an I don't know, just like looking at an orchestra within myself, or just like kind of like orchestra, like I don't know, like composing essentially. Just like, okay, like let me focus on sound selection here, like just getting into the weeds of like the production style more, and like paying more attention to sonic landscape and the trajectory of a song, whether it grows throughout or whether, you know, it's just like a short statement. And just, I think in short, I began to just respect songs more and respect them as like their own beings and their own lives, and treat them like a living, breathing world, essentially. I'll answer one more, and then actually I'll wrap these two up and then we'll keep going. Hey E, it's E. Did you start writing to instrumentals you created, music other people created, or did you just start writing in silence? That's a great question. And at first, I just started learning my own, like my favorite songs on guitar, and took some of the chords, rearranged them, or just like played around and learned some other ones. And then the first song I ever wrote, or the first song I ever like recorded and made, I'd taken a poem from my AP English class in high school, and you know, worked on the rhythm and found the right chords for it, and that's how it kind of came about. But there's a place and a time for each of these approaches. Because eventually I did start writing to instrumentals that other people created, like Public Library Community with Conrad. I found him on Bandcamp back in 2015, and that was back when like SoundCloud was in its like heyday, and so many people were just like collaborating and creating on such like an extemporaneous way, and just like doing it to do it. It was so fun. And so that's when I started realizing like, whoa, other people were really fucking good at this. Let me just like collaborate with them and situate myself close to them and like learn. And so I started writing my own stuff, both in silence, I guess, and accompanied with music. But then it, you know, eventually transitioned into writing to other instrumentals. All right, I'm going to answer Sam's question, and then we're going to keep going. But I will get to these questions starting with Patty at the next break or at the end. On theme with the duality of songwriting, how do you balance your different musical influences and styles? That's a great question. I think approaching a song or approaching a session knowing that I've got this toolbox here, and you know, I almost like a Pokedex of sorts, of just like I can reference like any song or any artist, you know, and not like take what they do, but remember how I felt when I heard the music for the first time, and try and apply that ethos, and apply that like intentionality, and you know, some of the tonal elements of it to my own music. And so like the first thing that comes to mind is like, I love how much space Kings of Leon creates. Like their music, their songs are so tall. It just like the reverb that they employ is like, oh, chef's kiss. I remember like, because I think I gravitated to like dream poppy stuff and like drowned out like shoegaze stuff occasionally, and I think it's because of how melodic and how just like much umph there was in Kings of Leon, and like their, like it's an edginess at the same time too. It's just like really well balanced. And so I don't know, I think I remember and know that not everything has like belongs in one song. Like that would just be exhausting and almost be a disservice to what I'm trying to say, or all of these musical influences that I've like grown up around and with. And so just knowing that I have the opportunity to pay like homage to, or homage, however you want to say, to a certain artist or a certain style of music, and not uh, worrying too much about, or like not being like too heavy about it, I guess, or heavy-handed, I guess. I don't know. But that's a great question. It's definitely become like an unconscious process, and so I appreciate you asking and reminding me about that. All right, I see all these other questions. I can't, fuck. I'm gonna get to that for sure, but feel like it'd be a good time to get into the abstract and the concrete kind of sides of songwriting. And I feel like it makes more sense to get into the abstract first. So let's run it there. This is set up perfectly, honestly. I often equate songwriting to meditation. Like when I begin writing a song, I try and commit to reverently and like calmly entering a space, whether that's like a actual space or a mental space, where I do my best to like truthfully communicate what I see and what I feel. And I like to use the imagery of the Room of Spirit from Dragon Ball Z, or I think it's called the Hyperbolic Time Chamber too. But 1 year in this room is like 1 day on the outside, and it feels like this endless blank canvas, and like where everything you need is right at your fingertips and available, whether it's like tools for training or like sustenance, or I think also it's like the gravity, it's like 10 times Earth's gravity inside there. And so it's just like a mental trigger for me, or just like almost like a physical or like a mental mantra in a way, where there are like fewer distractions, and it just like being there almost charges you with this respect for your craft. And so similar to this and meditation, I think songwriting requires this mindfulness and this like self-awareness, and you have to really surrender to your intuition and your feelings. And again, like kind of akin to meditation, the looser the grip, I feel like the thinner the veil. And this is what we were talking about before. It's kind of making me, it makes me think about the law of reversed effort. I've kind of begun like over the last 2 years, well, even, I'll bring it back. Like back when I was just starting with music, before I like had developed like an ego within it, I think it was just a hobby and it was just fun. And I was just doing it because, and wasn't thinking about it. And I think for me, that's when the best stuff comes out. Is when you're not paying attention to like an outcome. You're not considering all these pundits. You're not, aware of all the opinions that are gonna come about once it touches more than your set of ears. And so I don't know, I've like begun setting like an intention before each writing session with no goal, no like preconception, no like fitting square pegs into round holes, and just like accepting what happens. And I've found that, I've like made some of my favorite stuff. Like again, I think right when I started, there's some really cool shit that I was doing and putting out, and that was fun. And then I like overthought it, and then my last album came out, and so I've kind of completed this. I don't know. I've kind of closed this loop of like returning to an old pattern of just like, oh, it doesn't have to be that serious. It isn't that serious. Life is not that serious, and so why make it? Why make a mountain out of a molehill? And so letting go and treating songwriting like a practice and like an opportunity to quiet the noise and kind of streamline your focus onto one thing it's really powerful, and it's really, really cool. And I'm grateful for every single chance that I get. Like some of my like favorite sessions that I've had, I don't remember. Because it's just like you get into a flow and time dilates, and like 3 hours pass, and you're like thought it was 10 minutes, and you've got a whole song sitting in front of you. And so there's this like metaphysical nature to it, and just like it's a very delicate and I don't know, there are these opportunities for self-discovery within songwriting. It's similar to meditation, and treating it as such, just like for me, has it's only bolstered my craft and just made me like what I'm doing more. So I don't know, a song kind of becomes this like intersection of sorts where you have this unique opportunity to both like honor your truth and your present, while also submitting like to the power of creation, you know, like conscious creation of something new. Because life is an impressionable drug. Like our words our words become the foundation of and for our reality. Like I've been giving myself mantras for the last like 2 or 3 months, and it's crazy seeing how that just like how having something exit your mind and just like coming out of your mouth and like appreciating it with your other senses, how you can like live and breathe that. It's so fun. It's so cool. And so in a similar way, you have this opportunity to create a new reality in songwriting. And there's also this element of self-discovery too, of like making sense of the past while setting intentions for the future. It's just a beautiful process, and it's deserving of the awe and respect that we give it. And after doing this for like 6 or 7 years, I've had the opportunity, or several opportunities, to witness the prescience of the creative process. Because like I said, some of my most like memorable, or just some of the most like powerful sessions came from a very like, they felt very subconscious and felt almost like I was a conduit for someone else speaking through me. And so another thing I kind of want to touch on is just like finding the magnificence in the mundane within songwriting. And one of my favorite songwriters ever was once asked in an interview who some of their favorite poets are, and they responded that they actually never had any formal schooling, and so reading has always been like pretty difficult for them. And so then they said that some of their favorite poets would have to be like the clerk at the bodega, or having a conversation with somebody in line, or like the happenstance meetings on the subway or in the park. And I really agree with this, because I feel like if you approach life with this sense of wonder and like gratitude, the prompts are everywhere. Like you look and feel called to share the beauty and awe with the world. And it's really, really cool. Like art is, it's important to remember that art is like everything is context dependent for more or less, but art in particular is context dependent. Like your art is dependent on who you are and where you are, and it's a mirror of your surroundings as much as you are a mirror of your surroundings. And I don't know if anyone's got to pick up the Rick Rubin book yet, but within the book he shares this tidbit where, and I've kind of alluded to it before, but he says that we are in constant collaboration with the universe, and I just think that couldn't be more true. And so I think there's just like a delicate and intangible quality to the process of songwriting. And when you open your mind to the subtleties of life, and just the intentional and present practice of it, it can be a really rewarding process, and just like you can learn a lot about yourself. And I think just really, that's one of my favorite parts about it. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with the abstract side of things. I'm gonna go through the chat here for a second. But if anybody, Patty, I'm gonna get to this this question that you asked before down the ways after, if that's cool with you, just to keep things topical and keep it flowing. But let's see. I love that you channel the feeling over the sound. That's so clear in your music and all of your tunes. Create so many feelings themselves. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. One last question How do you quiet the tone of your environment? I'm curious would you be able to, I'll definitely answer it the best way I can right now, but I'm curious if you could expound on it really quick. Actually, if you wouldn't mind, Keanu, just give me a little bit more context for that, and I would love to answer. And then in the meantime, I'm gonna just go down one message. Either from a sound or writing perspective of the work you've put out, what are you most proud of? I am most proud of, from a writing perspective, I'm most proud of my first album, Sublux, that came out, because I wasn't it was much more of an unaware, like the creative process felt so much more, again, like subconscious, and I had something to say and I had a story to tell, and I didn't care how other people perceived it. Like, I look back on that music now. I look back on all my music, and that's something that I'm working on. It's something that I'm working on within therapy. But I look back at all my music, and I struggle with listening to it and sitting with it, because I think, well, it's twofold. We're constantly growing, and I definitely in parts like disagree with some of the things I was saying back then, but or just like the way I approached creation back then. But it's also really heavy, and just like there's a lot of life that's like just baked into it and just injected into it. And so I think I'm most proud though of Sublux, just because of how true to my life, and how forgiving I was of I don't know, like the sophomoric nature within which I was creating. I was just, because it was like I've been making music for 2 years, like, or maybe like, and like seriously like a year. And so to not like, punish myself for being uh somewhat of a novice, and just like accepting, like taking the blows of like, I disagree with that, but whatever, we're gonna put it out. Or like, God, I remember we got the first masters back, and I was like, I'm not putting this out. I can't do this. This is not it. And so I'm proud of that moment, and proud of that creation, because I was patient and understanding of myself at that time, and I was true and honest to myself at that time. And so yeah, but I'm also really, really proud of the stuff that has yet to come out. And I'll share a little snippet of a song down like later on too, like as it pertains to like the concrete nature of songwriting. But I appreciate that question. Thank you. What do you make of the uptick in disconnected brutality in lyrics? The 1975 being a clear example, especially with regards to balancing the abstract and concrete, as you've discussed. Disconnected brutality and lyricism. Do you have a 1975 song in mind? I would love an example, actually. Yeah, thank you. Verse 3. I'm gonna pull this up right now while you guys are here, if you don't mind. I know some Baxinista tote bag chic baristas sitting in East on their communista keisters, writing about their ejaculations. I like my men, like I like my coffee, full of soy milk and so sweet it won't offend. Okay, I remember this song. All right, let me come back. Uptick in disconnected brutality and lyricism. I mean, I think Matty Healy in particular he's a sensitive songwriter, in the sense that he's very aware of the many different like dimensions of life, and like the inner work, like how interconnected like everything is. And I think that might be who he is, but two, I think there is like I'll kind of get to this later on too, but there's like a growing call for novelty, and in a day and age where, and I think I tweeted something about this like a couple weeks ago, but like it's so easy to be derivative of something, and it's so easy to with however, like with so many artists, when however many artists there are now, like 100,000 songs uploaded to Spotify a day or something, whatever that metric is, and like it's much more of a saturated market, and it's the approach is just changing, I think. And so with that, there, my opinion, I'm just maybe of the opinion that well, one, with an increased accessibility and increased like awareness and like the immediacy of things like brutality and violence, like with like everybody's got a phone. And I think back to like World Star, like when there was this obsession with watching people fight just on the street, and how often particularly marginalized communities are put on the internet, just like being abused or being harmed and being like subjected to brutality. It's making, I guess it's just making it more, making us more callous or just more normalized to something of like the brutality like that you're speaking of, or that I'm speaking of. And so it's both like it's very, I'm all over the place, but I'm going to try and like make it succinct. And I'm thinking of three different things. One, Matty Healy is very aware, and I think he does his best to relay social commentary within his music and within his songwriting. And I think that makes him who he is and makes the 1975 who they are as a band. And then I think it's easier to speak about, and we can combine these two, it's easier to speak about those things, one, because they're right in our faces every single day. And music does have a nature and has like gone in this trajectory of like being somewhat watered down. And so I think there is a calling for like these flashes in the pan of like trying to draw people in, or you know, in the same way that the news only puts on bad shit, like people, it's like you can't stop watching a train wreck. And so I think it might be just like a more of a subconscious effort of like including that within songwriting to, I don't know, to draw, whether it's to draw people in or to comment on it and bring it to other people's attention, and to publicly disagree with it and just to create discourse. But that's a really good question. I really appreciate you asking that. I'm gonna, let me make the chat a little bigger. I'm having trouble reading a couple of these. Desensitized, absolutely. Let's see, okay, if you close your eyes, this is back to Keanu's question about how do you quiet and how do you quiet the tone to, or how do you quiet to the tone of your environment? He said, you've talked about, wait, no, that's not Keanu. If you close your eyes and you sit with the fan on and a car passes by and there's no other sound, I feel as though you can create a stillness in the love you're feeling in your environment. But what if you want to get there when you're in a room of other musicians, have a busy mindset, or somewhere? Oh, this is great. This is a great question. Something that I keep reading, there are ins and outs that people were talking about on like 2022, 2023. And so it's like in, well, whatever. And then out was like grounding exercises. And I was like, great, that's literally something that I just got hip to. And so what I would say is grounding exercises and mantras. I'm a very like sensory oriented person, and pay attention to that stuff, and it gives me a lot of comfort and gives me like stability and just context for, and just, I don't know, just frame of reference for who I am in that moment. And I started doing like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 kind of thing of like naming 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 different things that I can hear, like taste, smell, feel, etc. And then also a mantra that I've begin giving myself is it's my 5 C's. I'm calm, I'm confident, I'm creative, I'm compassionate, but most importantly, I'm conscious of it all. And repeating that and applying each one of those words to the current moment, or the day, whether that's kind of like setting an intention for who I'm trying to be and who I'm trying to exist. That really brings me down in a good way, like just settles me back into where I need to be, because it's very often, and I'm so thankful that you brought this up, because recently I was at a camp. I was like a quick songwriting camp, and I showed up a little bit late and missed like the main jam, but I came in hot and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to work. I'm ready to get my hands dirty. Let's go. And I was surrounded by some of like the people who I consider to be most influential to my creative process right now. And I came in way too hot, and the energy was a mismatch. And so it took me like settling in and being sensitive to the room, and like kind of retreating inward for a moment and giving myself this mantra of calm confidence and like conscious creation, and just general compassion for life and like the process and like these opportunities. And um it settled things really well, and kind of like allows me to, I don't know, that brings me down to the vibration of the environment around me. So I appreciate you getting into that a little bit and reframing that for me. I'm gonna get one more question, and then I will get to all of these and that I haven't gotten to. But this last one is, hey Healy, I was wondering, as far as utilizing production with writing, does the production generally come after to elevate the feeling of the writing, or do the production elements dictate aspects of the writing? It's a good question. And I think it's both. I don't think there's one right way that it can happen. Let me think of 2 specific examples. So I don't know how long some of you have been listening, but there's this song "Sweet Virginia" that was on like a mixtape that I put out on Spotify or on SoundCloud a long time ago. And one night, my old roommate Andrew was supposed to record me and my friend Logan playing guitar on this song, and he's out to dinner with his fiance, and they get home, they stumble in a little drunk, like an hour and a half later than he's supposed to be home to record us. And so we're like, what the hell, man? Like, what's going on? And we're like, we need you to record. And he's like, wait. And we've got this beat up old, like this piano that was out of tune, probably like damn near like a whole half step. It was probably like 30 cents out of tune, 30 cents flat. And he's like, tune the guitars to the piano. And so we're like, all right, fine, whatever, man. Sure. So we tune the guitars to the piano, and he lays down, we're playing the guitars, and at the same time he's laying down this beautifully just like innovated like stream of consciousness kind of arpeggiated swell of music. And we're just like, whoa. And so from that recording, it made me approach the vocal take so much more intensely, or just like so much more like fervently, of just like I needed to match the energy of that piano take and those strums and the arpeggio. And so in that regard, the production dictated the songwriting and the just the overall melodic and approach, with like volume considered too. But with something like deep cuts on my most recent album, it's I had a lot of memories of being like visiting Brooklyn and spending time with my girlfriend for the first like intentional moments. And I just had my keys twirling, and I always had my keys on me, and they were like on my belt loop. And had like some meaningful keychains on there. And so I knew I wanted to, like, based on some of the memories that I was writing about, I wanted to include the keys just as like a production element. And they ended up being like very percussive and occupying like some nice high frequency real estate for the song. And so it goes both ways, and it really depends. It's like a song. I approach every song differently, and each one deserves its own approach. That's a great question. I appreciate that. Really quick before things get too deep, we're gonna finish with the concrete. I'm not gonna take too long, but yeah, we'll just get into this and then play a short snippet and ask for a few more questions, and back to your Sunday. So we left off talking about the abstract, and so now we're gonna get into the concrete side of songwriting. And so when I think about the concrete side of songwriting, I think about like the literary devices, the motifs, the themes, stuff like that. And so I've got a couple of things I'd love to touch on here, but the first of which is structure. And really quick, I don't know if you know who Dan Harmon is, put a thumbs up or something in the chat. Whatever you want to put in the chat. But if anybody doesn't know who Dan Harmon is, he's that looks like a Rick jacket right there. Dan Harmon's the creator of this show called Community, and he's also one of the co-creators of Rick and Morty. And so I'm a diehard Donald Glover fan, and I was first introduced to Dan Harmon through Community. And eventually, after like several years of watching Community and then finding Rick and Morty, I kind of began to realize that Dan Harmon was this common denominator in some of my like favorite moments in pop culture at that time. And so I dug a little deeper and found a series of like talks and blog posts that Dan Harmon gave on this thing called the Story Circle. And essentially it's what is Dan Harmon's version of the hero's journey, which came from Joseph Campbell's comparative mythology book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces, where I've got a quote pulled up over here where he says, "A hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man." And so it's this, Dan Harmon's is like, it's an 8-point story structure dichotomized into two realms of order and chaos. And so the journey is from the perspective of a story's main character, but the hymn that kind of holds it together and makes it really like fun to apply and interesting is the notion that the audience, and in our case, the listener, is going to assume the role of the character that we're writing for. And I've got this pulled up over here. I haven't referenced it in a minute, but it's 8 points. So the character starts in a zone of comfort where life is just mundane and unchallenging, but they realize they want something. And so, you know, the desire compels them to take action. And throughout that, you can elongate that and shorten that as long as you want. Because sometimes within that is this like refusal of the call to adventure, and then like a subsequent acceptance because there is no other option. And so this character enters into an unfamiliar situation, and they cross the threshold from order to chaos to pursue what they want. And so you're in this new context and you're forced to adapt to it, which is number 4. And they acquire skills and like learn how to survive in this new world, in this new environment. And then the next point is they get what they wanted. You know, they achieve their goal, but eventually they find that they pay a heavy price for it, because again, there's this push and pull with life, and this duality within life as well. And so there are new and unexpected losses that kind of follow this victory. And so we're rounding ourselves back out of chaos now and returning to order, returning to a familiar situation. And then the final point is having changed. because change is like, and I preach this within just like life, but also art and everything too. Change is like the only constant thing in the world. Shout out to Alan Watts. Thank you, Alan, for that tidbit. So there's nothing to do but to just like join the dance and embrace change. And so that's a big like pillar of this story structure, is this change that takes place throughout. And it's this like beautiful loop of a perfect circle. And there's this denouement, and the story's resolution is always like there's a lesson that's provided to the character. And so you think about almost every episode of Rick and Morty, and I mean, it starts with them at the dinner table, and things are just like chill and quiet, but then like some shit always goes down and always happens. They're like, we got to go, we got to do this. And so there's this call and there's this activity that takes place. And so I applied this when I was working on my first ever like album, Sublux, and you can listen through, and we're not going to get into it today just for lack of time, but in your own time, feel free to listen through and have the story structure pulled up and see if you can pick up on the moments. Like Reckless is like the opening track, and it's a lot of like information of just like setting the stage and setting the scene for this character. It's like, this is the world that he lives in. This is like, and it does like take a lot of information from my life, but we get into this other concept of like a honesty saturation ratio kind of I don't know, some of the earliest songs I wrote were very autobiographical and just like a direct carbon copy of life at that time. And so that sort of like entry into songwriting set the tone for me. And after about 3 years or so, I just started get this itch for fiction, and that's where the story structure comes in, because you can like saturate, you can use the structure to create the boundaries of your story and create the boundaries of your world, and recognize the magnitude of it, and this like how big the space is that is the story's occupying. And it can help you problem solve and give you foundation to stand on and write on. And in the same way that like creating the rules for engagement for songwriting and for like telling the story, it offers you a rubric, but the existence of that rubric kind of also just implies that the rules can be broken. And so it's really, really cool. It's like I love getting to talk about this. I remember when I was like typing this, I was like, oh wait, oh my god, the story structure, the story circle. So if you got any questions about that, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll get to them in a few minutes. But some more like other devices and things that I consider are things like imagery and like sensory play. But like with imagery, you have to remember that whether you realize it or not, you're creating a world and a context in which the song exists. And this can be accomplished in more ways than one. Like some ways I like to do it as in word form, which is like simple but potent, like scene setting. And so let me see if I can, I may save it for later, but there's a couple lyrics like in this one song where the first words are like "sun on my back," like the heat, it feels like a fleece, and like the fleece, and like retro like X, it's like the type of fleece, and like need a new vantage. So even right there, like if you need a new vantage point, that's like, you need something, you want something, and you're being driven and called out of that. And so another song example that I've got, kind of ready to release. The first words are, spin the fall in Georgia, maybe I'll come back, Atlanta Brave. It's like immediately you have a context of like you're in the Mid-South, or you're in Georgia, or you've spent time there. And so if you've ever been there, or at least like witnessed or gathered anything about Georgia, you're like, okay, it's probably humid as fuck. It's like, you spent the fall, and it's like, this time of year or whatever. And so there is this like very simple yet profound way to do it within like words, but there's also a way of like incorporating nature and life into your songwriting and into your music, and that's something that I always try and do, just because like Rick Rubin says, we are in constant collaboration with the universe, and I love creating a frame of reference for where I'm working at that time, and like just like where I'm immersed in the process. And so whether that's like with Sublux, I was 100 yards from the train tracks and they woke me up at 3 a.m. almost every night. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna use them to my advantage, to where I can like not be pissed at these train tracks, but just be thankful for them and grateful that they're creating this context within which I can, hear. It's like it's a B, like the tone of the train tracks. It's like, like an octave, a B, and incorporate that into the storytelling and just create a more like tangible sense. Because that kind of gets into this sensory play where great art, in my opinion, is multidimensional in the sense that it should exist in more than one plane. Like you should be able to like taste it. You should be able to smell it, hear it, and like all these things. Like feel like you can touch it. Like this one demo that I've got written right now. Some of the lyrics are, sweaty bangs, honeysuckle, steady hangs that hit new levels, your feet drumming down sycamore, and you could smell the roots after the storm. And so it's just like all of this really deep and like aromatic even, or I guess like ambrosial senses. Like, I don't know, it just like tethers you to the world, and or tethers the listener and you while you're in the process, but tethers the listener to that world in which you're creating. It just gives more of like, it just offers more context to your perspective. And I'm really inspired by like some authors in particular, Haruki Murakami, and I have a couple of excerpts from his book Kafka on the Shore that I want to read really quickly, that I think does a really good job of incorporating some like sensory information and like personification within songwriting or within storytelling, but then applying it to songwriting. So this takes place at a cabin outside the city in outside of Tokyo. It's after 6 a.m. when I wake up. The air is filled with a shower of bird calls. The birds busily flit from branch to branch, calling out to each other in piercing chirps. Their message has none of the deep echo and hidden implication of those the night before. When I pull back the curtains, every bit of last night's darkness has disappeared from around the cabin. Everything sparkles in a newborn golden glow. I light the stove, boil some mineral water, and make a cup of chamomile tea, then open a box of crackers and have a few with cheese. After that, I brush my teeth at the sink and wash my face. I pull on a windbreaker over my yacht jacket and go outside. The morning light pours down through the tall trees onto the open space in front of the cabin. Sunbeams everywhere, and mist floating like freshly minted souls. Come on, man. The pure, clean air pierces my lungs with each breath. I sit down on a porch step and watch the birds scudding from tree to tree, listening to their calls. Most of them move about in pairs, constantly checking to see where their partner is, screeching out to keep in touch. And then, it keeps going, but the next one's, I follow the sound of the water and find the stream right away. He's bathing you in these senses and just like really creating the world for you and making it easy to just immerse yourself in this. There's another excerpt on page 56 that I wrote down. Let's see, where I think this is more along the lines of, okay, yeah. Oh, the context he creates. I take a bus back to the station and have a steaming bowl of udon in the same diner as the day before. I take my time, gazing out the window as I eat. The station's packed with people streaming in and out, all of them dressed in their favorite clothes, bags, or briefcases in hand, each one dashing off to take care of some pressing business. I stare at this ceaseless rushing crowd and imagine a time of 100 years from now. In 100 years, everybody here, me included, will have disappeared from the face of the earth and turned into ashes or dust. A weird thought, but everything in front of me starts to seem unreal, like a gust of wind could blow it all away. And so sick, so cool. He just like brings you right here to the veil of like surrealism, or just like, you know, you're treading the line between realism and surrealism. He's like, this could all vanish. It's all subject to change at any given point. And being able to incorporate that kind of stuff in songwriting is such a powerful tool, and it does more than you realize. And I think it does more than I realized too. So if you haven't read any Murakami, and I don't have the chat pulled up right now, but you should give it a listen or give it a read. Kafka on the Shore, or Wind Up Bird Chronicle, or Norwegian Wood are some of my favorites. And he's got a new book coming out in a month that you should pre-order. So last two more things just to touch on, and it's kind of like rounding things out. I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't be who I am without a mentor of mine who was my AP English teacher in high school, Jamie Brummer. He picked up on the fact that it was a really tumultuous moment in my life, and he was really considerate of that and gave me the tools to express myself and find my voice. And I get emotional just thinking about it, because it was just like, if that wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't be here talking with you today. And so he hammered things into my head of like, the first sentence of a book is one of the most important sentences in the book, because it's like, now more than ever, with like people's attention spans being like looking for these, like you said, flashes in the pan, and looking to be hooked immediately, it matters more than ever, like more now than ever, to just like bring people in. And so he hammered in to me, like, make sure you start things with a bang, like make sure you get right into the meat of what you're trying to say right away. Just like every sentence should propel what you're trying to do and accomplish what you're trying to say. And there should be action, whether it's obvious or not. And he gave me like cool prompts. One time he was like, all right, write me like a thriller, like a fiction thriller, but only use two, like don't use any more than two. You can't use 3-syllable, 4-syllable, 5. You can only use 2-syllable words. And I was just like, all right. And so just like having to just like toss all of these words out and just like, you know, critically think, it created I don't know, just like an appreciation for a bunch of different words and a bunch of like different styles of writing. And you always tell me to proofread my papers out loud, because again, if you read them in your head, you're just gonna fill in the blanks for yourself, and you're gonna fix the mistakes that you have in there just by nature, because you're smart. And so reading it out loud and hearing what you're saying with another sense really matters. And so now whenever I'm like songwriting, I always like, I have to sing it out loud in the process and see how it works. And yeah. I remember this one time, I thought about it. We were given a prompt of like a short story, and I turned in the short story, and it turns out that I had essentially rewritten the brief and wondrous life of Oscar Wilde, and hadn't realized it. I hadn't read the book. And he gave the paper back to me, and it was just like, hey, but he also gave me this book. He's like, here's Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, based on your short story. I feel like you would really like this. And at first I was like, oh fuck, he thinks I plagiarized this. But that kind of leads me, and like the last thing I want to say is, and it's something that I'm really trying to be intentional about these days, is conscious creation. Whether that's like having a selective attention to the inspiration around you and the music that you're listening to and the humans and the concepts and the artists that inspire you, and respecting their journeys and not mistaking their journeys for your own journey. Because that's, I don't know, you just owe, I think you owe it to yourself, you owe it to other artists, and you owe it to anybody who listens or reads what you do to be novel and to be like really intentional and listen to yourself and sit with yourself and figure out what is it that what am I called to say? What am I being called to share? How can I use the tools that I've learned in my life and the process of listening and reading and learning? How can I apply those while also respecting other people's journeys and respecting other people's lives and creativity and art? And I think that's just more important now than ever. And so I'll leave you with that, and I'll also just like leave you with just a general gratitude and appreciation for being here and listening to me, and letting me just speak these things out, because like I've shared in this talk, actually hearing your words out loud matters, and it helps kind of like inform and get like a back and forth going with yourself, and it enables growth. And so thank you, and just remember there's no one right way to do it. Like I've obviously shared what works for me, but what works for me might not work for you, and that's totally fine. But that's the beauty of the journey, you know? So I appreciate you guys listening. Let me pull up this chat, and oh, we still got 30 people in here. Let's go. Feel free to shoot some texts. I wonder if there's a way to, can I hide everyone that's here so I can just pull the chat up and make it larger? Oh, here it is. Got it. All right, let me get to Patty's question first. Way up here. As a musician lives off their craft, do you have any tips to avoid the pressure of having your creative output tied directly to your daily needs? In particular for artists who right now are hobbyists who want to make the transition to living off of music financially. Yeah, I mean, to be very transparent with you, I've like encountered this over the last year, just because I basically had all my, like given the rights to my music to a label, and they, you know, I technically was indebted to them because they gave me an advance. And so since I was no longer working with this label and I had to recoup this advance, I didn't have any money to live off of. And so there was a shop, like a corner shop, like a bodega kind of thing around the corner from my spot in LA, where I had to make money outside of music. And it was really fun too. It was like I got to be the food, like the pantry and beer buyer for this market. And so like I really got to like develop my palate with beer and wine and stuff, and bring some, like, I don't know, meet some cool people in the process. And it just reminded me and made me aware that you can't, and Adam and I were talking about this before the call too, you can't, like, as much as you want to, there are, like, you're not one dimensional. Like you contain multitudes, whether you're aware of it or not. And I think having a side hustle or like keeping hobbies or finding a way to like monetize your hobby. I know that's such like a icky, like 21st century answer to it, but let's not even think about hobby or monetizing it. Just like finding things that you're passionate about and doing them. And again, like approaching them with this law of reversed effort of just like immersing yourself in the process of life and doing it for the sake of it. The universe provides. And I know it's super cheesy or just like weird, like this guy is like on some like weird Zen Buddhist shit, but I really am, I mean it when I say that the universe provides when you need it and you ask for it, it's there. So trusting the process, finding other outlets from music, and not trying to approach something that is that delicate like art and music as a business. Like eventually, yes, once it gets to that point, it needs to be approached as that you need a business manager, blah blah blah. But doing it for the sake of the passion and love of it, and keeping yourself like diversified, I think is important. How do you go about generating cohesiveness across a larger scale project? Do you find it happens naturally because of the time frame of songs made and sounds to across that time, or do you make the intentional decisions to create it? That's an awesome question. I really appreciate. By the way, that was Murakami that I was reading, Daniel or Dashel. So, oh, this is Patty again. What's up, Patty? Yeah, I think, well, yeah, just like it does naturally happen. Like in LA, helicopters were everywhere, always above me. And so I felt, I was like, okay, I'm like, they're, whether I know it or not, they're in my recordings because I'm recording in this really thin windowed sunroom. And these crows are like cawing and like clicking in the backgrounds, and they found their way in a couple times. And so things like that, motifs and themes, like direct ones like that are pretty obvious sometimes, or just like show themselves. But then with regards to like overall, like the more, I guess, like thematic elements of like songwriting, those are those kind of sometimes subconsciously happen too. But one of my favorite things to do is to take a batch of songs, whether they're done or not, find a way to make them connect to one another. Whether that's ending like one song with like a binaural audio that picks up on the back or the front end of the next song to the way they feel like lock and key, or incorporating these like momentary, you know, moments of like bits of dialogue that just are the perfect segue into the next song, like before Back in Time at the end of Immune. My friend Bonnie and I are just talking about past lives, and I thought, I was like, that's perfect right there. And so it's both. It's definitely both. Are there any recent artists or albums you've been listening to that have shaped or altered your creative process? That's a great question. I've been listening to some old stuff, like a lot of Donny Hathaway and Arthur Verasai or Verachai. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but that's really informing like my tonal decision making and like sound selection in general. The Let's see. I don't know. I think let me pull up Spotify really quick and see if anything jumps out right away. Because I love getting to share stuff like this. 454 I've been listening to a lot, and he just like kind of speeds things up and doesn't really like have any set rules that he abides by. I love how I've been listening to When I Get Home by Solange again, and that's just like so raw, and it feels very effortless. Like she just like floats across it, and I think that's uh cool that she was able to capture that kind of intentionality within her music. So stuff like that. But I'm really like, I haven't really been listening to too much new stuff recently, just because I've been trying to mix and master this project that I'm working on. I'm gonna scroll up. Just want to tap in, say you're incredibly well spoken. Oh, thank you, man. Wondering what and how your experiences have been connecting with other artists and how that has affected your songwriting in any way. If it's ever difficult to collaborate in songwriting with others. Yeah, for sure. Oh my God. I had a songwriting session maybe like 2.5 months ago where I knew exactly what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it, and the person that the songwriter I was working with just they weren't open to it, and they were really fighting me on it, and it definitely like it affects the energy in the room, and it affects the vibe, and so I at that point I was just like, all right, let's just finish this session, and I'm thankful for this opportunity because it made me more confident and made me more aware that I know what I want and agree with what I want to do, and just like have a vision. And so it was confirming in that sense. That happens occasionally though. So but I've found that I like to do most of the writing on my own. Sometimes I'll do some co-writing with like producers that I really trust and love, but it takes a really developed creative relationship for me to feel like I can do that. One of the biggest platforms for musical visibility in this age is TikTok. I know this happened to you with Reckless going viral near the beginning of the pandemic. What did you think of this experience, and what social platforms are doing for music? I mean, like, when songs go viral on TikTok, I think they have the tendency to become bigger than the artist that made them, and I think that's cool. Because it's a double-edged sword. It's cool that like this one sound, or these like collection of sounds, are able to touch immediately like millions of ears, just like instantaneously. It's so crazy. And I think that did, I mean, it's helped me recoup my advance from RCA, and it's also just like made me aware of the dynamic of social media and stuff. And so I'm I'm all for I'm all for doing TikTok and social media in a way that's like true to you. You can't force somebody else's. You can't like like take someone else's format. And if you can, if you want to, cool. That's whatever. But I think more what TikTok or social media and the combination of that and music does, or like exists as, for me, is just an opportunity to uh, project, or just like share my brand, or just like develop my brand more and share like who I am as a person, and not like, I'm not like, of course I would love more people to listen to my music, but at the end of the day I'm just trying to express myself. And that's a really cool, it's cool, or it's just like a cool approach that or the approach that I agree with most. So it's definitely like sending music in more of like an audio visual direction. Like for example, I'm maybe only going to do like one music video for this EP that I'm working on, and the rest are going to be short form videos. Just because they're more digestible, and it's what works right now. So you just gotta like, excuse me. That's just like, that's the nature of life. You just have to change. Like change happens, and you have to be able to pivot and lean into it. Azulejos, yeah, man. I got that name after I was like in Spain for 2 months in 2013, and we traveled into Portugal, and Portugal is covered with azulejos, and there's this blue plate cafe. They're technically azulejos blue plate, and so there was a cafe in Memphis called Blue Plate. So it's about that. I'm just drawing a comparison. Okay, I'm gonna get to 2 more questions, and then I unfortunately do need to skate, but I'm gonna go most recent, and then, or like oldest and then most recent. I deal with a lot of dissociation and disconnection from the present. Can hear what you're saying, but know the last thing you said. So caught up in remembering that I tend to forget is a lyric I wrote that kind of encapsulates that feeling. It's very frustrating. Have you ever battled with connecting with the present, and how has that reflected in your songwriting? If so, what kind of emotions poured into the words? Um, yeah, I mean, it definitely, yeah, I think songwriting is my the way I do it is dangerous, because it's like I rely heavily on past experiences and past memories and feelings, and that dictates like the work often. And so it's a lot of reminiscing. And I think it takes a lot of intention and sincerity to be able to, you know, allow yourself that opportunity to reflect and make something, but to remember that it exists in the present. And that's something that I've, you know, I've had to go back for this most recent EP. I've had to go back and fix a couple or change a couple lyrics because I don't want them to just exist in the past. I want them to exist now, but in a reflective way. And so like this one song, it's like high and little five, you and me creep in a Jeep. And before it was high and low, like high and little five, we used to creep in a Jeep. And situating that in the present, it just like it creates that experience for me and just reminds me like, okay, I'm writing this now. I shouldn't, you know, tether myself to the past. I can, you know, appreciate it. And so it just, I think it just takes some and just practice and intention behind it and meditation. I really would recommend meditating. Knee deep in his audio Rex now. Hell yeah. Okay, cool. What do you recommend when you're stuck with writer's block? Go on a walk. Go on a walk, read, like literally move your body and don't try. Like don't try and write. Like just let go. Accept the block because you wouldn't have seasons of growth without you can't have spring without winter. Like you can't, like you've got to go through these periods of drought to be able to appreciate and experience the lush, really creative seasons. And so just don't fight them, just accept them. And that's done wonders for me because it's just like, okay, cool, I'm gonna stop thinking about this and just like keep living life. And it's so healthy. All right, last question. Let me find the right one. That's a good question. Let's do, what do you do when you get to a point in a song and you don't know where to go from that point? Similar to this last question, I give it space. And that's something that I think is, you know, this is a great question to end on actually, because this EP that I'm working on is 5 songs. And right before leaving LA, I just moved to Brooklyn recently. If you can't hear all the sirens and all the foot traffic and everything. Right before leaving Brooklyn or leaving LA, I was like, okay, there's one more demo that my friends and I have like nearly finished. We should just like spend 2 days just going it, just doing it, finishing it. And we did, and finished writing it. It was great. It was really fun, but you know, over the next like 3 weeks to 4 weeks, you know, I was sitting with it. I was like, this song, it doesn't develop in the right way. It's not a linear development, and it doesn't, you know, there's no like obvious signs of growth throughout. And you know, it just doesn't sit right with me yet. And I was willing to hold on one second, let me just send a text. I was willing to forego those things and be like, okay, and you know what, I'm just going to submit to the process and just like let go. And I tried to, but eventually I came to the decision that I need to spend more time with it and it needs to sit for a little bit longer. And so I'm at that point right now where I don't know where to go from like with a certain song, and it needs time and it needs space and it needs like distance. I need distance from it. And so don't force it. Just don't force it. Give yourself like clemency and give yourself the grace to not have all the answers right now. Just like, that's part of the reason sometimes why I take like, in the past have taken like 4 years to release another project, is because I just haven't lived the life and I don't have the answers yet. And songwriting is like a puzzle to me. And sometimes you have all the pieces in your pockets already, and you just like know where to go with it. And other times you got to build or like look around for the pieces. And so maybe just look for the pieces for a little bit longer. But I might have to call it there with questions, but I'm so grateful for this opportunity to get to like touch base with you guys. But would you be able to join using the same link for, oh yeah, for sure, got you. Cool. Yeah, I don't know if Adam, if you want to like say bye to everybody or what, but I do want to just, I want to thank you and thank everybody at QWave and everybody that came through for being here and just dedicating your Sunday to listening and feeling open and like just like safe to ask the questions that you did, and I wouldn't be who I am without you guys, and that is just like a beautiful energy swap and something that I'm just eternally grateful for. I love you guys, and yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you for coming through, man. I just like, I was in a trance like for the past like hour and a half, so I was like, oh shit, I have to like speak now. But yeah, I have my just like waiting for you to bring this up. I was like right here.
Oh, let's go, Costco.
Well, I just had it next to me, and then you started bringing it up because I know we were talking about it before, and I was like, oh, let me just grab it. But yeah, man, thank you so much. I already told you how much this means to me and to so many people at school here. And for those of you who don't know, just quick closing thing, like even started making music when he was in school, like so many of us, having to balance like work life, probably a dissertation and like crazy stuff that even probably undergrads like us wouldn't even know. But yeah, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity, man. Thanks, you guys.
See you guys.
Peace.